Hi, everyone. We are back and so excited to have this conversation, which I have a feeling, Tashira, is going to be the start of a lot of these mini episodes. What is percolating, and how we approach what is happening on the national level in our country and how it's impacting us and how we can engage our community in advocacy and social movements, both for our own well being, but for the societal good, because there's a lot happening, and people have a lot of questions.
Yes. Uh, there's a lot going on that I think we both have opinions on that are noteworthy. Just being citizens of the world, honestly. And we can no longer deny what we are seeing. And we are at just a turning point in our society. I don't want to give too much credence to American democracy prior to this moment. However, what we do know is the crumblings of it can definitely not be denied. The cracks, the fissures, they are there. And so we want to talk to you all about really what started off, right, Em, as Project 2025, which we had been requested about.
Yeah, so we individually last week started talking about Project 2025 as we were starting to read about it. Um, and so we had planned to do this episode on 2025 and what is it and is it real and what would be the implications and are these policy agenda items even possible? And then we started getting requests because understandably folks are very confused and scared. So we want to kind of demystify that. But in the meantime, we can't deny what is happening right this moment, at the national level with our current president and who is going to be the Democratic nominee for president, in November.
Yes. So last night was Joe Biden's press conference, and it should be noted that he has not done a press conference by himself, unscripted, as far as answering questions from the media in quite some time. And people were very I guess we just wanted to know where he was because the calls had been coming in quickly for him to step down. There was a growing number of Democrats, I think 14 prior to the press conference, 15 after. And then we had George Clooney, who did the kind of fiery think piece in the New York Times that set the internet ablaze, saying that I love you, but it's time for you to step down. And we know that he is a huge, huge Democratic donor and supporter. And so here we are today, post press conference, and we still have a Biden who's not saying that he's going to step down. So let's start there, Em. What are your thoughts about the call for him to step down? Do you think he should do it? And what would that mean for the electoral process?
I absolutely think he should step down. I think he has been a very, very strong president given what he inherited from the Trump agenda. I think he, among most politicians of today, can work with people and get things done. So I may not agree with all of his agenda items, but I think he has been a very good president. I also think he is a good man, and I think he has dedicated his life to the government and to public service. But it is time for him to step down. It is clear that something happened over the last couple months. It is clear that something happened during the debate. It is clear that he is suffering from something. We don't need to know what it is.
Yeah.
And it would be reasonable for him to be suffering from something. He is 81 years old. And so I fear that him prolonging this is really tarnishing his legacy. I wonder why the people around him are not insisting on this. And I worry what it's going to do to the health of our country.
Do you think he could beat Trump?
Now,
Mm-hmm.
no.
Yeah.
Because I think that there are so many people, understandably, who are already so discouraged and disbelieving in the system before this, that there are going to be so many people who don't vote. And I would say that there is a completely competent person who is ready to take over, who, if Biden gave her his support, people would come out and vote for her. But because of her identity and people don't like her, um, he's not. And
It sounds like you're describing me. Are you talking about me? Our resident thoughtician?
well, President Thought Life.
Wait, shit.
No, I'm talking about Kamala. I
Okay.
think it's just it's wild to me. I mean, it is like the tropes over tropes over tropes about her being unlikable. Um, and I don't really I there are also other people. I mean, like anyone, any, and I don't want to be ableist or ageist. It's like he is not well. He is
Mm-mm.
not going to get better. And
Mm-mm.
so what? We run him. He like, even if he were to win, which I don't think he will, something is going to happen. So Kamala's going to take over anyway.
Yep.
And it's going to be a big fucking thing. What do you think?
Oh, child, so much to unpack here. A couple things. I totally agree with you when you say the fact that we are even here demonstrates that he should not run, right? Even if everyone got it wrong, which is hard to believe. But let's say everybody got this thing wrong, the entire assessment that we are seeing the media, those Democrats who are calling for him to step down, we are all wrong. The fact alone that we are questioning his cognitive ability is why he should step down. If you truly are a patriot and you love this country in the way that you say you do, that is what it's going to take for us to see ourselves on the other side as winners in November, if you care about the party, right? And I think as it relates to Kamala, look, I made no secret on this channel about not being a big Kamala Harris fan. Find her to be the police. I think there's something about respectability that is at play there that also doesn't necessarily bode well for me. But she is a career Democrat. She understands the Beltway. She will get the job done. And what I said to you before the call started was, what would it look like for him to actually be in a position of an advisor and someone who could truly support her in public and behind the scenes to get the job done? And people age. This is what it means to be a part of the human experience. Step down, step down. And I actually think it could invigorate a party that at this point is just feeling very like ho hum about even going to the polls in November. It may be short term chaos to have a greater gain, actually, because it could galvanize people around a moment. And that is what I feel like we really need that the other side has.
Yeah. Can I say something also? So I was listening to a podcast this week, Pod Save America.
Mm.
And I don't typically listen to it, but they're former Obama people who, and they were saying, like, if this was just a blip, we all have blips, we get a bad night of sleep, whatever, our tummy hurts, I don't know. Then his people would have been charading him around the morning news stations, doing impromptu interviews, walking down the street, not keeping this cone of silence around him.
Yes.
And that makes it feel like they think we're stupid, which to me makes me angry at Biden.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so I'm with you. I also think my friend Laura said this, and I found it like overwhelmingly accurate, and I had never quite put my words on it, that we as a society of Americans want to fall in love with national politicians, with our president, but all presidents are fucking war criminals. Like they've all done dirty stuff to get where they are and had to make sacrifices that you and me maybe wouldn't make.
Yeah. I mean, by way of their title, they are the head of the military. So, yes, very much so.
And so, what if it's to your point? We might not be in love with Kamala, but what if it invigorated all of us to get everyone we know out to the polls and vote?
I'm glad you brought this up because for me, as an organizer, this is where I think the conversation needs to go. Because what we are seeing are the shortcomings of the electoral process as it has been created in this country. We are seeing the failings of a two-party system. We're seeing all of that in front of us, right? So, what would it mean for us to play the game in the way that it has been envisioned, that it currently exists, but to also put boots on the ground, get in community, and effectuate real change from the bottom up and from side to side, right? What would it mean?
And right. And like Biden, okay, so and practically speaking, Biden needs the black vote.
Oh,
What
absolutely.
black people are going to vote for Biden?
Girl, they had to clean up something that he said recently. My fiance told me that he said something about having more blacks. I've been fianced, guys. We'll talk about that soon. Um, what something about having more blacks around him, you know, and people were like, "What,
Excuse
Joe?"
me, sir.
But you know, like the blips are common, like the way that he called Kamala President Trump last night, the way that he called Zelensky President Putin earlier in the day.
We are not dumb, or we are. And that's the problem.
Well, I think
That those are big. I mean, everyone about last night was like, well, it didn't hurt him, it didn't help him. I don't know, calling your vice president who you've worked with for the last 4 years by the wrong name and gender and
Trump,
race.
trumpet that. Um, look, I come from a family and a culture that is very protective and have a reverential relationship with our elders. So if this was not the president of the United States, we probably, for me at least, would be having a very different conversation, right? I would be a lot more compassionate around how to sunset this whole thing. And for me, my compassion has run dry. I have nothing else to give because I cannot be convinced that part of this is not ego, is not is not also some obsession with the power that you have to have, obviously, gained over the years as the
And
president
it
of the United States.
and it's disingenuous because he and the party were so critical of Trump and Trump's ego. But what's more egotistical than this?
Speaking of that, we talked about this earlier before we started recording, right? This idea that he kept saying last night, I'm the one that can get the job done. There's more to be done. I can do it. I'm the one. I. Why do you get to make that call about yourself? And also, what are you saying about Kamala implicitly when you say that? All right, so we're going to get to Project 2025, but do you know much, Em, about like the Democratic Convention? And if he was to step down, the mechanics of how we would get the next person on the ballot?
So I have talked to a lot of different people, and everyone has their own opinion about what they think is the right way to do it. I don't. I have heard that it has to happen this week. I don't know if that's self-imposed or, well, it's Friday, so I don't think anyone has any idea. We're in unprecedented, uncharted waters, which I think for a lot of people can feel scary. And there's also a lot of opportunity there. So I'm not scared. Um, I mean, I am, but I also believe that we can do this. We just need to do it.
It just has to be done, and there are no two ways about it. And speaking of what is to come on the other side, if we do not get our act together and galvanize people to vote, because that's going to be the biggest issue, right? It
No,
is.
people are not going to come out and vote because how are the two best candidates, Donald Trump and Joseph Biden? Of all the people in this country, that's the part that's so offensive to so many folks and understandably makes them very skeptical of our electeds.
And so it's going to set us up for the conversation about this political agenda that Trump is trying to distance himself from, but we know has been informed by his cronies and such. But I have to say this one last thing, which is we knew 4 years ago that he was old, right? We knew 4 years ago that, to your point, things don't necessarily get better around cognition as we age and just our physical ability to have such a demanding schedule. So, one of the things that frustrates me about the Democratic Party is how reactionary this party always is. Because where was the planning then for this moment?
And why do we have a system where we're so like we can be respectful, we can laud people's accomplishments? He told us 5 years ago that he was a one-term president. Why hasn't there been secession planning for the last 2 years?
Exactly. And not only that, but is it just me? I feel like we don't actually see Kamala often. There
No, they like hide her away.
where I've been like, where is the vice? Don't we got a vice president? I literally be like, where is Kamala? So confused about the role because if it was on the other foot under an Obama presidency, shit, we saw Michelle back then more than we see Kamala.
And we saw Biden and Dr. Biden more than we see.
So there has been obviously workings behind the scene that you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to believe that it's all been quite intentional and quite possible to allow for him to coalesce as much power as possible, despite what he told us 4 years ago. And politicians just lie. They just lie out of when their mouths are moving, I feel like they're lying. And that is why it's so hard for me to believe deeply in the electoral process, and goes back to my earlier point about the need for grassroots organizing around liberatory principles. We will link some organizations down below for you all to take a look at to just learn more about what is on the ballot and how important this election year is. Because, girl, Christian nationalism, have you heard of this? My first time hearing that term actually was when I was researching Project 2025. That is actually this entire agenda and evangelical movement that we're seeing right now is under a larger umbrella of what some conservatives are calling Christian nationalism. And it is their hope that those religious principles that fall underneath it are going to spread far and wide throughout the government of the United States. So, Margot, talk us through the Heritage Foundation's brainchild, known as Project 2025.
Well, there is this thing called the separation of church and state.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of that.
And our country, which was built on the backs of enslaved people and immigrants and native folks in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multiracial place, which is called the United States of America. And so this idea seems laughable. I mean, I don't want to be flippant because there's a lot of movement around this, but
Yeah.
it's laughable to me
Yeah.
because it's what we've talked about, this idea of kind of creating like monolithic principles for huge swaths of people. It's like we all have our own different intersectional identities, some of us more than others, but this idea of like a heteronormative white Christian family in the suburbs is not the majority's experience. And no one is trying to devalue that. You do that if that's what you want, but don't make that my experience or your experience because
Amen.
it's not.
Amen. So, some of the things that I've seen floating around, because by the way, from what I can see, the full agenda is not for public consumption on the website, right? You have to purchase the book to get, but that's the last thing that my dollars will be going towards. And so, what I've seen floating around, which is not hard to believe, are things like a full abortion ban, banning immigrants, which we've already seen, right, by the Trump administration. It's things like basically dismantling a lot of public agencies like EPA, denying any claims around climate justice, of course, and climate change. What are some other things you've seen?
Public education, states' rights. So the federal government really like losing kind of national, like any kind of federal or national agenda to defer to the states.
States,
Kind of,
yeah, which is Not a new conservative argument. Yeah,
No, it's not a new conservative argument, but like does bring into question things like the EPA or highways or Social Security,
absolutely. Which
the
they all
military,
want to get rid of around Social Security. Yeah. So the complete erosion of a public safety net.
food stamps, which goes through the Department of Agriculture, right?
Yep.
And and so this idea of, and intentionally so, right? Like making each state its own country and then slowly spreading this deeply abusive agenda.
Which I saw also allegedly includes an end to marriage equality.
Oh yeah, also that, right? So oh, and ban books, any identity and sexuality education in schools. Um Clearly like very anti LGBTQIA
Yep.
inclusive policies. I imagine that would extend to the military as well. So like probably taking back don't ask, don't tell. I don't know. Like this idea of creating separate classes of people based on their identities and who has value and who doesn't, and what we get to learn and when and how.
And can I just say too, that for folks who want to deny this agenda or as Trump said, he has no idea, what it is. We are already seeing so many pieces of this that even if that's not in an actual conservative Christian nationalist handbook, it doesn't matter. Pieces of this between the bathroom bans, anti-trans legislation, the overturning of Roe versus Wade through the Dobbs decision, the presidential immunity case that the Supreme Court just voted on, the stacking of the Supreme Court, right? All of these things are right in front of us. So I actually appreciate somebody laying out, no, actually, this is part of the plan. This is what the plan looks like. How can we fight against a ghost? I want to see you put your white supremacist, cis heteronormative agenda, transphobic, Islamophobic agenda in front of me. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I also think, to your point of gratitude, it's a really interesting flip, but I'm with you that for the folks who are skeptical of the fears around like the impact of the right, they can't deny this. Right? So
And
it's like, oh right, you're freaking out because you have a queer child. You should be. You live in Florida and you have a trans brother. Oh, you need to move like up north, like
yeah,
or whatever. I mean,
it's real. And this is where I think that we have got to do a better job of being able to speak in ways that everyone understands and find a narrative that lands. Because over my vacation, I had a family member who was with us who was questioning the difference between a Donald Trump presidency and a Joe Biden presidency. And some of the examples that we were giving him that were going to change were things that are actually in this agenda. And he was like, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Actually, it can happen. And we are seeing it happen right before us. But because we have not figured out a way to narratively, right, shape this current moment in time.
and we're not doing anything to get people like your family member on board.
Absolutely, because he is working class, like he is somebody who is doesn't have a formal education beyond high school, right? A good guy, solid dude, but he is not the person that so much of our political rhetoric and talking points reaches, which goes back to the need for continued grassroots organizing. Because if not, we miss people who, honestly, in my opinion, their work in any kind of movement building is what actually effectuates change. It is the people who are most disproportionately affected by what is happening in our society. Those who are the most marginalized, right? We are our own liberators. We are the people that actually are able to get shit done. And so here we are, facing this possibility. Again, Trump says that he is against federal abortion ban. He's walked back a lot of those talking points. He's trying to distance himself from it, but we
He's
know,
like, I don't know who did this. I don't know anything about this. And it's like, dude,
girl,
everyone who wrote this used to work for you.
used to work for you.
It's also like when he said he didn't know what QAnon was, but then he was signing to them. Right?
Girl,
He's like, what's QAnon?
oh, or when he was like the Proud Boys, I don't know.
I don't know who the Proud Boys are.
Down, and then said their damn, their rallying cry. But
I'm not racist. I'm not anti-Semitic. I have a Jewish son-in-law.
Girl. The last thing I'll say about it, though, is that it is a scary time as far as this whole agenda is concerned, because, Margot, they want to overthrow the government. Literally, the president of the Heritage Foundation said that he is looking forward to another American revolution, but that it could be peaceful if liberals allow it. January 6th, right? This is what they actually...
That was the progressives' problem. They just weren't peaceful.
Supposed to peacefully allow for you to attempt to overthrow the U.S. government. I mean... up is down, down is up, I guess. I'm not sure. You all stay tuned. Any other thoughts, Em, about either Biden or where we are right now with this conservative movement?
No, but I'd like to hear from our viewers and listeners below. Please keep asking us for the content that you want around this. Tashara and I have a lot of thoughts. They're just our thoughts. But one of the goals of the platform is to galvanize people of a big age, and we have power in our own communities. And so it's important for us all to be having these conversations, not just you and I.
Absolutely. And on that note, you all, please make sure you are subscribed to our channel. We are on the road to November, but so much other things are also in store. Like Margot said, we don't want to be fatalistic about where we are right now. And life keeps lifing, even in the midst of a very perilous political time. And so stay tuned for our next episode, and we look forward to seeing you then. Bye. Thanks for listening to Justice. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to learn more about our podcast, be sure to check us out on our website at justicepodcast.com. You can also reach out to us there if you want to be featured on the show, or if you have a business or a product that you think would be a good fit for our audience. Thanks again for listening.